This is Dateline Wyoming, produced in the studios of WyoRadio. Dateline Wyoming is a weekly news feature highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. In-depth analysis and interviews with the people behind the headlines. Presented Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or those of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. And now, Dateline Wyoming. The 64th Wyoming State Legislature will convene the 2017 General Session January 10th at noon. This is your host for Dateline Wyoming, Tom Ellis. Our focus for the next 2 weeks will be on the Wyoming State Legislature and the issues expected to be addressed. Dateline Wyoming after this message.
She's kind of a big deal. Some people like to say it's only because of how she looks. She sticks her tongue out a lot. But there's just something about her that makes people do crazy things. Like get tattoos of her face, or wait in line for hours just to say hi. Lil Bub is a 2-year-old cat, an Instagram celebrity with a following bigger than some 90s television stars. And it all started because she was adopted. You can't buy a best friend like Lil Bub, but you can adopt one. Help us save them all at bestfriends.org.
Our guest on Dateline Wyoming this morning is Dave Hanks, CEO of the Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce. Our topic of discussion is the 64th Wyoming State Legislature. Dave, welcome to Dateline Wyoming.
Good morning, Tom. How are you?
We're just doing fine. We need to talk a little bit about the state legislature. It's coming up, going to start on January 10th with the opening session. It is the 64th session of the Wyoming State Legislature. Let's start off with maybe just a little background on what the difference is. From year to year, from session to session, the sessions aren't exactly the same, are they?
No, there's a 20-day session, which is the budget session. That was last year. And then there's the 40-day general session, which is this year. Typically in Wyoming, when they put together the budget, it's a 2-year budget. It's a biennium budget. They did that last year, and usually your budget issues and those type of things are all discussed at that time. During the general session is when you get a lot of the other bills that come in that aren't necessarily related to the budget because there are some procedural things during a budget session. You have to meet certain thresholds in order to bring a bill up that isn't budget related. This time, I am sure, though, the budget will be a major topic.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about how the Chamber of Commerce interacts with the legislative process.
We do actually quite a few things. We know our legislators fairly well. We're in conversations with them throughout the year. I mean, different things come up because there's always committee work that's going on, interim committee work, different things, standing committee work. So we have a pretty good relationship with our local legislators. And we also have a very good relationship with the governor's office out there. We try to keep abreast of what some of those different issues are. Then as we get closer to the session, we interact on a couple of different levels. We do our legislative roundtables here locally, trying to get the issues out there, kind of listen to what our members are saying. Is there something, a key issue out there that's coming up? We visit with the city and the county, see what major issues are coming up for them because they are, they're closest to the people as far as how budgets impact our citizens. How do they impact our local businesses? How do they impact our local infrastructure, our services that are provided? So we pay particular attention to what they're saying there also, simply because we have to have those type of things in an area in Sweetwater County, in the city of Rock Springs and Green River, in order to attract business, to retain our businesses, to provide those services to our local citizens. We also will go down to the legislative session a couple of times. We'll go down and have a legislative reception for all legislators and the top 5 elected officials. And then we'll go down for the chamber. During the chamber has a business day at the legislature, the state chamber, and we'll go down and visit with them on issues there. Then we'll be down probably again for a couple of other key issues that'll be coming up. Some of the things through the Wyoming Business Council. So we're kind of in and out. We actually, through the chamber and through the Wyoming Travel Industry Coalition, WTIC, as an association with those, we have a lobbyist that's down there that monitors key issues, also provides us with a daily brief on those issues as they're coming up, makes us aware if there's something coming down the pike that we may want to make sure that we're contacting our legislators and give them our opinion on. So we monitor that on a daily basis, basically, when the session's going.
Speaking of your membership concerns, what did you see as some of those concerns that were raised?
Some of the biggest concerns out there, simply for our local economy. School funding is obviously one. People have kids. People go to school. We have to have a well-trained, skilled workforce. So schools are definitely a big issue out there with a lot of people. There's been some discussion out there on how different entities are being funded. What I mean by that is whatever happens at the state level has typically rolls down to the county, rolls down to the city. There's a lot of different agencies, there's a lot of different organizations, there's different groups out there that receive funding, whether through the city, the state, the county. And it can be healthcare, it can be education, it can be our roads and bridges, it can be our infrastructure, our transportation, all those different things. Typically what happens is that when the state starts cutting back on those type of things, then those different organizations and businesses or institutions start looking to the local level, and then they start approaching local entities about funding or additional funding or supplemental funding or those type of things. That causes some problems because their budgets are being tightened up as much as the state's budget, and they have less money to deal with. So it's kind of a snowball effect. It just kind of rolls down. And when the state cuts, then they look to the county. When the county can't do it because their budgets are down, then they start looking to the cities. I mean, it just has a snowball effect. It really is a problem for a lot of these different organizations out there and some of the services that we as citizens expect to happen. When that money's not available out there, those services are going to be cut. They're going to be restricted. We're going to have to pay more for them, those type of things. You know, it isn't one thing doesn't just affect one thing out there. You kind of look at this as globally because it really starts affecting services down to your streets being plowed.
The downturn in the economy is responsible for a lot of these budget cuts. The problem being, the catch-22, if you will, is that at the same time the budgets are being cut, the needs for some of those services are increasing because of the downturn in the economy.
There's no doubt about that. Some of those services and some things you don't have any control over. Some things, depending on the life cycle of a facility out there, it may be the life cycle is up. I mean, it's just the time. It's wore out. It needs to be taken care of. It can be water treatment plants. It can be sewer plants. It can be roads. It can be sewer lines, it can be water lines, it can be all those type of things that need to be taken care of. Deferring maintenance really is a catch-22 issue. A lot of times for a lot of our cities and towns, once you start deferring those type of things, they end up catching up to you simply because, I mean, you can only defer for so long and then you're going to have to bite the bullet. The other thing I think that we have to realize is that the state is funded a little differently than the cities, towns, and counties. The state is funded basically through the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. It's an assessed valuation within the state. That's a big driver, and that's our minerals. I've seen numbers anywhere from 65 to 80%, depending on the county that you're looking at, depending on the state agency. That's the amount of money, 65 to 80% is funding what's happening in the state of Wyoming from mineral extraction, whether it be royalty, use tax, sales tax, assessed valuation, those type of things. When you get down to the city level, the primary driver is sales tax. With less sales, you have less sales tax out there. We do get money, a little bit of money from the state. We get some programs that help offset some other things. But the primary driver at the local level is local sales tax, and that accounts for the majority of the operating budget for cities, towns. The county is kind of a mix. It gets sales tax and assessed valuation. So things can turn around much quicker at the local level when things start to pick up than they can at the state level, simply because number one, the state's budget is so much bigger, but the other thing is that those assessed valuations are typically 12 to 18 months out. That's when you start seeing the actual taxes being paid on those type of things. Things can turn around quicker at the local level, which is a positive thing. Hopefully we're going to see a tick up come this spring and summer, but at the state level, it's going to be a while before we see any changes out there.
The formula for distributing those sales tax funds was changed this last legislature, was it not?
Well, the cities and towns took a 57% cut. So when they start talking about cuts for state agencies and those type of things, really no one has seen the cut that came to the cities, towns. 57% right out the door. The governor has proposed a $5 million exemption budget or a supplemental budget for emergency funds for cities and towns. If somebody's sewer plant fails or something like that. But $5 million is really not going to go very far. Something catastrophic happens to one of our towns out there. The cities have really taken the brunt of this, and the towns have taken the brunt of this, and the counties have taken the brunt of this to start with. Then on top of that, you have reduced local sales tax. So you add that on top of it. There's counties out there that are approaching anywhere from 40 to 50% reduction in sales taxes last year.
We mentioned educational funding. What other issues do you see is coming up that'll be important?
Well, I think educational is a really a big one, Tom. I'm glad you brought that up because the projection right now from the Department of Economic Analysis through the state and everything is about a $1.5 billion over the next 6 years. That's a huge amount of money. We are fortunate here in Sweetwater County simply because we have A lot of our schools have been built already. We're completing a project up in Farson right now, which the money is one of the very last projects through the construction fund that will be completed. That's a very, very big one. Health Department is looking at some major cuts again, too. And that gets down to a lot of different issues. It gets down to issues for funding for the hospital, Title 25. It gets down to what type of services that are going to be able to be offered to people here, locally. That's another one that's going to be a very tough nut, to deal with. And we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. Obviously, there's a lot of talk right now about repeal of the Affordable Care Act. What does that mean? I don't think anybody knows. How is that going to transition into a new form of some type of insurance out there? All those things are kind of unknowns, and I think they could have major impacts on the quality of service and the level of service that's going to be provided at the local level.
Other issues that
one of them that's coming up is House Bill 19, sales from remote sellers. The state of Wyoming has typically a larger percentage of online sales in a lot of places just because of our remote location and our distance from large centers of commerce, such as Salt Lake or Denver. There's a bill out there, an interim bill, that would require sales tax collection from out-of-state companies selling online in Wyoming. We'll see how that goes. It's been tried in other places. At one time, per capita, we had one of the largest percentage of online sales per capita in the United States. That's a lot of money that's leaving this state that never is collected by this state. It's really kind of put some of our brick and mortar businesses that are here at a disadvantage. We should be doing something about that, and that's going to be brought up in the House. We'll see what kind of support that it has. It doesn't create really a tax on anyone. It's really taxing the companies that are actually doing the business in the state. They're the ones responsible for paying that. I haven't seen a whole lot of debate on this. I haven't seen a whole lot of background information, but the idea is kind of to level the playing field out there a little bit for our local merchants and our local retailers.
As online sales continue to increase every year, that sales tax from that particular source would be significant.
Just coming out of the holiday season, you can see that online sales increased again. They have every year for, the last 5-6 years. Those numbers continue to go up, and those are dollars that just leave our state. They're never captured or brought back into the state. So something that we want to follow closely to see how it's going to be implemented.
How was business during this past Christmas season?
And we're trying to get a little bit of a handle on that. We talked to a few different people so far. Some stores did extremely well. Again, it's kind of a mixed bag out there. Some were down. A number of the retailers told me that their sales came late, very late, that last week before Christmas. Seemed to be when there was kind of a little bit of a buying frenzy out there. When the sales tax numbers come in for December, that'll tell us really more about the story and what really happened during the holiday season.
Dateline Wyoming with our guest, Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce CEO Dave Hanks continues after this message.
Teacher, because they know a lot of awesome stuff. I'll stand in front of the class and make sure everyone knows what I know.
If your child is sick over and over again, it could be PI, a serious defect of the immune system. Early testing gives children a chance to dream.
And when I'm a teacher, my favorite subject will be recess.
Jeffrey Modell Foundation, helping children reach for their dreams. Visit info4pi.org.
Dateline Wyoming now continues with our in-studio guest, Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce CEO Dave Hanks. If somebody wants to get involved in the process of working with the legislatures through the chamber, what can they do? How do they do that?
Well, anytime anybody has an idea, they can email us directly, call me. I'm happy to talk to them about it, see what the issues are out there. The other thing that you can do, it's very easy to get in contact with your legislative delegation. If you just go to wyominglegislature.gov site, everybody is listed on there, your representatives. There's a phone number. There's also an email. I know the legislators really like emails. If there's a hot button issue that you're particularly interested in, you can do that. And once the session gets closer here, and we're pretty close, but the LSO Legislative Service Office will start posting all the bills. And once they post all the bills, you can go through and start looking at those different bills by category. What are some of those bills that are coming up? And I anticipate that there'll be several hundred bills out there this year. There typically is. We've got quite a large group of new legislators coming on board. Some of the leadership has actually changed out there, but I think it's between 25 and 30% are new legislators that are coming on board. There's a steep learning curve there. There's a lot of things to know. You have to be involved in the legislature for quite some time in order to know exactly what's going on and how the procedures work and where the money is and where do the revenue streams come from and all those type of things and how budgets work. For the general public, the LSO, Legislative Service Office website, the Wyoming Legislature website are very good. All that stuff will be posted on there. Probably the quickest way is actually via email to make comments to them directly. And again, if you have something that you think that's extremely important that you would like us to take a look at, we'd be happy to do that too. We'll follow some of our general things. On behalf of WTIC, the Wyoming Chamber of Commerce, the cities and towns, and those type of things that we keep an eye on a daily basis. But if there's something in particular, and like I said, with that many bills, there may be something in there that you as an individual have a vested interest in. The best way is to look at it. Where is it at? When is it going to be acted upon? When is it going to hit the floor? Those type of things, so that you can monitor that. The other thing is you can always go down there. They usually have an open session during that time frame that they will solicit comments from people. But really the best way is get a hold of our local legislators. They're there. They're in it every day. They know exactly what's happening because things change. I mean, it could be one thing in the morning and it changes by afternoon. Get a hold of them, let them know what you're thinking. They'll let you know where it's at and what can be done about it.
The difference between this session and last year's session is that since last year's was a budget session, there was really a restriction on what kind of bills could be entered and what could be put forward. This year, however, it's open to whatever somebody thinks they want.
If they can get it out of committee and they can get it to the floor, and if leadership will move it, it's pretty much open out there. I mean, it's a lot of different things. And during the budget session, pretty much, I think you have to have a 2/3 majority in order to even bring it to the floor if it's not a non-budget issue out there. So it's going to be challenging for them. I mean, this is not going to be fun. They've got a lot of work to do, and they've got to look at everything. You know, we've cut, and we continue to cut. You can only cut so much, and once you cut so much, then you're not cutting fat anymore. You're actually cutting down. So we really need to be looking at some additional revenue streams. And my hope is that they go back and visit Tax Reform 2000. I remember when that was put together, and we actually had some local legislators who are no longer in the legislature anymore that actually worked on that. There was a very good blue ribbon task force that put that together. They had a lot of recommendations. Unfortunately for us, or fortunately, in 2002, things changed and turned around for the state. We were flush with money. We started coming in, and we kind of ignored that. We didn't really implement any of those recommendations. Well, we're back at that point now. We really need to take a hard look at that.
Refresh our memory on some of the provisions of that Tax Reform 2000.
It really went through. I mean, it was a lot. It looked at everything from fees, additional tax revenue, taxing streams possibly, but it got down to actually what we're charging for service fees for, like, even down to ski passes and different things like that. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff in there. I mean, it was very, very thorough. A lot of those things standing alone did not generate much money. But when you put them together and you started looking at it, it was a lot of little bites that added up to some money and added up to a substantial amount of money. The other part of it is that, typically state income tax is not a real popular idea in Wyoming. If that's not going to happen, then we need to be looking at where are some of the other things that we can do as a state in order to generate some additional revenue streams out there. If we want to maintain the quality of services that we have in this state, and we have some very good services in the state, and we don't pay for a whole lot, then we're going to have to look at what are some of those other revenue streams. Small bites are usually more preferable than a big bite for, like, income tax. I think that would meet some major opposition throughout our state. But maybe there's some other things out there that might be more plausible, possibly something that people would feel better about doing, share the burden. So I think that they need to get creative on that. If you have any ideas on that, I think it's extremely important that you let the legislature know about that, let your representatives know about that, because I believe that everything is on the table for this session. I think that they're going to be exploring as many things as they can, simply because we're at that point. And the other thing is this may be part of the new reality for the state. The state may have to really, for the first time, not look to the next boom cycle, but actually look at how do we level out our income streams, how do we deal with our additional revenue streams if there are some out there, how do we look at some new revenue streams to kind of level out the field a little bit. so that we're not going from that boom and bust cycle, which impacts us so substantially every time it happens.
It should be said here, too, that another avenue is to get involved with your local Chamber of Commerce, and that gives you voice in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're, like I said, there's a full-time lobbyist that we have down there. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's not full-time lobbyist, and it's not just ours. It's actually a lobbyist that is retained by the state chamber, which we are part of that coalition, and we can get some messaging down there rather quickly. The good thing about it, too, is that person is there all the time, so really keeps us informed of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And if something, it's not inconceivable that something comes out of the blue that you don't know, and all of a sudden it's hitting the floor, and it's like, whoa, what's happening here? So, we try to stay on top of that stuff that will negatively have an impact not only on our city and our town and our county, but also on our businesses that are here. There's something out there that really is not good for business, and we want to really keep an eye on that.
Before we move on to a couple of other subjects, anything else that you think we should be looking forward to the legislature?
I think it's extremely important to voice our concerns. There are definitely reserves out there. There's monies that are being put away that are above and beyond the constitutional requirements that we're doing right now. Not that we should be robbing everything out of our savings. Obviously, we don't want to do that. We want to be prepared for the future. But at some point, again, you can only cut so deep. Once you get down to a certain point, you're going to either have to start reducing employees, reducing programs, reducing services to the general public. So keep an eye on it. I think keep a very close eye on it. Let's see what the legislature is doing. Make sure that you're getting your input out there. It's a citizen legislature. They listen to the people. They listen to their constituents. That's why it's important for your citizens to contact your local representatives, because they will listen to you.
There is, quote unquote, a rainy day fund, but part of the concerns that we heard last year was there's really no definition of what a rainy day is.
There still isn't. There still isn't really on that. And, and that's a limited fund. I mean, it is over, and I've seen different projections on that from $1.8 billion or whatever. But there's other things that are going on, too. I mean, in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, constitutionally, we're obligated to put 1.5% of all mineral royalties into that, which is a great thing. And when that was set up, that really was a lifesaver, and it has been for the state. But we are putting an additional 1% into there on top of that. So we're really putting 2.5% in there. So is it time to step back from that? Some of the, that 1%, that additional 1%, maybe invest it back into the state, the local communities. The other thing is that Amendment A did pass. It gives our treasurer some flexibility in investing some of our funds to get a higher rate of return on the market out there. It doesn't give him full authority by any means. It has to be approved by the legislature, but it does give us another opportunity to maybe bring in some additional revenues through stocks and bonds and different things like that have been fairly limited in the past. So, I mean, those are type of things that we need to look at. We need to be conservative. We need to be fiscally responsible as a state. There are some options out there, some things that we can look at.
This being, of course, one of our first programs in January, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for a forecast, a projection, how you see the year 2017 coming.
Last year was difficult, was a challenge. There's no doubt about that. A lot of our smaller oil and gas companies simply disappeared. They weren't here. Support services for those larger companies gone. Our larger companies contracted as far as oil and gas. There was a lot of that out there. So far this year, we've had, there are some signs of things happening. I was just looking at the rig count. We're up 7 again. That was from about 2 weeks ago. The rig count for Wyoming was up. Most of those were over on the western side of the state, so we're actually starting to see some activity on that. I'm hoping that by late spring, early summer, that we start seeing a turnaround in the sales tax revenue in our county. We're seeing some hiring that's being done right now, hiring locally with some of the oil and gas companies, which is very good. Our bedrock businesses and industry out there, for instance, the Trona mines, Simplot, the power plant, the 2 coal mines, they've been doing okay. There are some expansions that'll be going on, I know, at Bridger and at Black Butte as far as acquiring some additional lease land. That's moving through the process right now through the BLM for additional coal. But they are hiring some people, so that's a very good thing for us. I think that, we're fortunate here in Sweetwater County simply because we have diversification within that extractive industry sector. And that's a very positive thing. Simplot, is just completing. As a matter of fact, they've been firing up sections of the plant right now, their ammonia plant, and they're going to be able to increase production out there. So I think there's some very positive things for us coming down the road. Looks like Gateway West, the power line, Gateway South, looks like they have final approval on most of that. There should be some construction hopefully starting maybe not next year, but the following year. We'll see. So there are some positive things out there, I think, for us as far as an economy here. And then, we need to continue looking at and diversifying what we do here locally as much as possible. And that's why we formed that coalition in July with the City of Rock Springs, the City of Green River, and the county, SEDC, the Sweetwater Economic Development Coalition, to really start looking at what is it that we need, how can we diversify, actually going out and recruiting businesses, which hasn't been done here for many, many years. I think there's some positive synergy there between the three groups and the chamber, and that should lead, hopefully will lead to bringing some things in. I'm not expecting any huge major plants or anything like that, but if we can continue to bring in smaller operations, maybe a manufacturing company, those type of things, they just all help. And no matter where it's at in the county, it helps the county as a whole. So we're going to continue to work with those groups. We're going to continue to look at that, continue to look at ways and opportunities for the future.
Any final thoughts this morning?
I just want to wish everybody a prosperous new year. I think that I'm hoping that 2017, I believe it will be a stronger year for us here locally. And if you need any, if anybody has anything, especially if you're looking at starting a business, or if you need help with your business, or if you need help with, anything, workforce, that type of thing, please contact our office. We have a lot of resources. And if we don't have it, we know where to go get it. If you're thinking about starting a business, or you're thinking about moving a business here, relocating here, whatever, come on down and visit with us. We have the resources, and we will help you in any way that we can.
Our guest on Dateline this morning has been Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce CEO Dave Hanks. Dave, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Tom.
You have been listening to Dateline Wyoming with our guest, Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce CEO Dave Hanks. A look at next week's Dateline after this message.
Kaya weighed just 1 pound 1 ounce at birth and endured a grueling 163 days in the hospital. Her story has a happy ending, but many of the 1 in 10 babies born prematurely in the United States do not. You can change that. Give babies like Kaya a chance to be born healthy by helping the March of Dimes fund research and programs that fight premature birth. Give families hope. Sign up today at marchforbabies.org.
This is your host for Dateline Wyoming, Tom Ellis, with an invitation to join us next Sunday at this time as we continue to look at the 64th Wyoming Legislature convening on January 10th in Cheyenne. Our guest will be State Senator John Hastert, representing Senate District 8. Please join us next Sunday for Dateline Wyoming. You have been listening to Dateline Wyoming with your host, Tom Ellis. Dateline Wyoming is a public affairs presentation of WyoRadio News presented every Sunday at this time, highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. Views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or that of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. Audio copies of this program will be available each Monday following the program's airtime on Sunday at youtube.com/WyoRadio.